Now that we have signal going through our channel 1, feeding our main left and right output, and also sending signal to our floor wedge monitor for our talent, the next issue that we have to address is going to be EQing. Now, just as with any other live situation, for most instances, subtractive EQing is going to be the preferred method, since it's easier to go for the bad things and take them out than it is to try and chase all of the good things that are present within the mic that we're using. So the best way I think of to accomplish this is to utilize the view keys that are on the tilted section of this console. So I want to go to EQ. I already have my channel selected, so selected channel 1, and I click the view key. Now when I do so, all of the frequencies that this mic is responding to are being shown in the real-time analyzer. So any peaks, feedbacks, anything that we happen to encounter, there's less guesswork involved, and especially if you're just getting into using your ears for EQ, this can help to train you. So RTA is really, really useful and always runs in blue behind our basic EQ curves. So you can already see that even though I haven't picked up the mic yet, now there are a bunch of little peaks happening in your low area. There's some happening in the mids, and then there's also some peaks in the highs. So there are a number of ways we can get to this, but the main goal in this is to make sure that the PA and the monitor speaker sound like the talent. So channel EQ is going to help bridge that gap in between what the presenter actually sounds like and what the console is hearing. So now that we're in EQ view, we have 4 bands on our parametric EQ to deal with. We have our low, low mid, and high. So the first thing before any of this takes place is to grab your mic, talk into it, and look at the low boundaries of the speech. As you can see on the RTA, we've got low, the lows cut off somewhere in the neighborhood of between 80 and 100. So before I even use any of this EQ, I can actually use the low cut filter that's already in the config preamp section. But since we're in EQ view, and this deals with EQ, it will actually show up on the EQ view's display. So if I click this low cut button in, you can already see glowing in orange on the left-hand side, a low cut filter. As I move the frequency knob, that moves that more into the range that I'm looking at. Now I'm looking at the blue display here, and the lowest I'm going to use here. So that ends up going at about 80 hertz. So I'm going to start about there. Or actually, I'm a little bit higher than that, closer to 100. So the lowest sounds that I can produce, or that I expect to produce. So without doing any EQing, this is automatically going to make me sound more like me to start out with. Now the next thing that we need to do is to produce some signal back through a speaker so that we can ring the channel out. Now if we were doing this for our entire PA, we'd be doing this on the output side. But for this, we're going to actually use the channel EQ for that, since we only have a single input. If we had multiple inputs, I would rather do this to the overall system. Now, with these QSC K-series powered speakers, they all utilize the same high frequency driver. So this gives us an advantage to that we can ring out from the monitor position, the floor monitor, so as not to interrupt any other crews that might be operating within the venue that we're giving a corporate presentation in. So what I'm going to be doing is intentionally inducing feedbacks and then looking at my RTA on the equalizer to show me what frequencies I need to take out with my parametric EQ. So since my goal here is to make things sound as natural as possible, I'm going to go ahead and first reduce the width or the Q on each of my bands, and I'm going to change my high frequency band to a parametric as well. So I have a little bit more control. This is one of those situations where unless there are multiple feedbacks within a region, I'm not going to utilize any of my shelving EQ. I want to utilize the fact that I have 4 fully parametric bands. So what I'm going to do is redirect the polar pattern of this microphone. Right now, we're dealing with a cardioid pattern, so it picks up mostly from the front, some from the sides, and has the most rejection in the back. Now, how to screw up that pattern to our advantage to induce feedback is going to involve different shapes with my hands around the microphone, and I'm also going to open my mouth in different shapes and allow different air resonances to happen inside of my mouth and induce feedback so that we can notch it out and have it out of our way ahead of time so that when showtime comes, we have less problems when it comes to feedback. So what I'm going to carefully do here is I have some sound feeding back through my floor wedge, and I have the high frequency driver pointed fairly well at me. So here goes the first one. Now we can tell it's in the lower mid-range area. Even though that is in the lower mid-range area, I'm going to save the lower and high mid frequencies. And since I already have a bunch of my lows cut off here, I'm going to utilize that one. So when I induce that, the RTA shows me that that's right around 630 hertz. So I'm going to, now that I have my low selected already, I'm going to slide that over until we've reached that peak. Now, if I need to induce again to make sure that my selection is correct, I can see that the line on my frequency selector matches right up with the feedback that I had. So again, since it's only occurring right in that narrow band, I want my bandwidth on here to be as near to narrow as possible. So, of course, in order to make adjustments, you can see if I'm turning the gain up and down, it's grayed out. Of course, in order to engage this, as with any Midas product, you have to have it turned on. So I'm going to start with a mild cut and then see if the feedback went away. Now that lower one has gone away. But we're not done yet, especially if we have to have our speaking talent at a higher level than that in their monitors. We're going to expect that since they're going to be about the same distance as I am right now, I'm going to go ahead and raise that. Try to induce some more. So that's right around 880 hertz. So I'm going to select my next mid-band. And I'm going to induce once more. And I see I'm right near there. So again, using a small bandwidth, I'm going to go ahead and make another cut right there. About the same. And then there's another one there. A little above 1K. So I have 2 frequency bands left for these. So again, I'm going to confirm what I have. Now I'm going to try again. And it's gone. So at this point, I'm going to raise my gain even further. Again, repeating the same process. Now let's take a listen to what our results are. So I'm going to go ahead and mute this monitor so that you can hear exactly what I sound like. Again, the goal with this subtractive EQing is to make this mic sound as close to me as possible. Now, the first step before you do all of this is when you first meet your speaking talent and introduce yourself as the audio engineer, begin listening to your speaking talent and recognizing the qualities in their voice. Of course, don't tell them that you're doing this because it's going to make them nervous and stuff. You don't want that. But be listening to them so that when you do this EQing, you can say, okay, I now know what they sound like. I want to make this happen. So you're hearing what I sound like. Now I'll unmute this. Let's compare that to the mic sound. The mic sound and my sound are almost identical. Now, let's compare without EQ. So here's my voice. And here's the mic with no EQ. Here, let's take our low-cut filter off. So now it sounds unintentionally or artificially boomy. And there's some high end that just isn't in my voice as you hear it. So now let's bring in the low cut, which is already a little bit closer to what I sound like. Now, let's apply the results of our EQ. So here's without EQ, and here's with EQ. Now compare my voice to this one. So, much better, but not quite there yet. You hear that little right around 6.3. So I'm going to go to my highs. Since I have one band left, we're going to move that down to about 6K3. Again, utilizing a very small bandwidth. Now I bring this in, so uneq'd, and as I raise my gain on the verge of feedback, hear all that squealy stuff? Now I bring my EQ in, and there's much less of it. So if my speaking talent speaks quietly and needs a lot of gain, you're going to have to spend a little bit more time with this section. But the results are worthwhile. And if you're using other mics of this same type, another trick that you can do here is to go into your utility section, and then you have your copy and paste functions. So you could utilize this second encoder from the right to copy your settings, and then say I was on channel 2. Say I had another 58 that I had to add into channel 2. I could select channel 2, and then click the paste button. It will ask you, paste channel settings from channel 1 to channel 2. You tell it yes, and the EQ ring that you've done for this one can now be applied to the other microphones. And this is how we do channel EQ using the parametric equalizer on the Midas M32.